Someone else is coming. All right. So some stuff. Thing number one, I'll start working on grades. I know feels like I'm always behind in grades, but once you turn stuff in, it takes a long time to grade it. So I'll keep working on that. Some other questions. Sorry, thirsty. One question that I keep consistently getting is, I took the quiz 2 times. How come you didn't take the higher of the 2 grades? Because you're only supposed to take the quiz 1 time. Because, once you take it that second time, you've already seen all the questions, which gives you a fairly distinct advantage. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, well, why do you even have 2 opportunities to take the quiz then? In the instructions, it says you should take it all once and in one sitting. The reason I have the two tries in there is just on the off chance that your technology fails, because stuff happens, and that way you've got the second chance. I would know the difference probably by how your quiz was completed or not completed and how much time you took completing that quiz, because I do get reports of all that. Now I realize there's still an opportunity for fraud there. There's always an opportunity for fraud, just hopefully you won't take advantage of that opportunity, because it's ethical and all that sort of stuff. So be ethical. Also, half your points come from the prepared stuff. So as long as you're not plagiarizing on that, we're golden on that. Let's see, what else do I want to say? The weekly questions are posted in the course documents section. So, okay. So, yeah, somebody was saying they're having trouble with the sound. So let me know if that happens again or if that continues to be the case. I know it's also possible, Zoom could be on your end too, and I know how that goes. So, all right. Weekly questions for Unit 3, and I decided to go ahead and post Unit 4 at the same time just to get it done for those of you that like to get ahead on things. I have not yet added those to the assignments section where you can turn them in. So that will happen over the next few days. I also have not made the review this for your quiz, the timed question. So that hopefully will be done by Friday. So a lot of stuff to get done. And I'll try to be a little faster about grading this time. We'll see how that goes. Hope so. All right, so we're going to talk about World War II. Oh, also, you're about a month and 10 days away from due date, on book review. So if you're planning to do the book review, reasons you might want to, if you think you're going to need extra points, because it's potentially 20 extra points, which is like half of a quiz. It's a pretty good deal. I know you got to read a book and write a review. So, did you all go away? Was that my fault? Oh, okay. I don't know if you went away on your screen, but you did on mine. So book review, you might want to do it if you need the extra points. You have to do it if you want an A. No matter if you get an A on everything we do, I'm still giving you a B if you don't do the book review. So make sure you do the book review. Lots of World War II opportunities for book review subjects. So, you've got a favorite general, a favorite battle. Not Hitler, though. No, this U.S. history, not Hitler. You got it, not Hitler. Okay. And also, it's going to be hard for you to do a Holocaust book because that didn't really happen in the United States. You probably heard. So we want something that either happened in the U.S. or really kind of directly affected the U.S. I know you could argue the Holocaust did, and I wouldn't argue against that, except I think you can find better U.S. history things to talk about. So, but I do want you to read something you think would be interesting. All right. I think that's it for the moment. You see if I left the weekly questions where we could find them. There they are. Look at that. Oh, goodness. Sorry, I'm moving the little pictures which showed up over the weekly questions on my view. Sorry. So your World War II question is chapter 22 question. World War II is often referred to as the Good War. Evaluate that title for that war. Is it appropriate? Why or why not? Now, okay, don't be funny when you do this and go like, well, of course it's appropriate because Hitler was bad and defeating him was good. So there you go. That's no. Make sure when you answer this question that you use some historical examples. Be specific. Tell me some things that you know that happened. Tell me when they happened. Describe what happened that were clearly good or that were positive results of this war. You may also want to add in some things that were fairly negative results from this war. You can probably think of at least one really big one right now that had to do with atomic weapons. However, there's Japanese internment, and there's some other stuff that we'll learn about that was also kind of negative. And I would also try to focus on U.S. involvement as you talk about World War II in this sense, but that doesn't mean you can't mention Hitler or other stuff that happened in World War II. Just remember, it's a U.S. history class, so I do want some information regarding World War II. All right, the other questions, which we'll talk more about later as well. By 1952, the Cold War was cast in terms of worldwide battle between freedom and slavery. So it's kind of a similar question as number one, except about the Cold War. And in this instance, you're going to talk about that conflict. I was going to say feud, but it's a conflict, more properly, between the United States and the Soviet Union. So explain how the Cold War had come to be seen in that way. So things that led up to that, which is why you have number two, events that illustrate this view. So, you can talk about events that caused us to think that or events that illustrated that, where people were either good or bad. There was no gray, just black and white, and the historical consequences of such a view. We'll talk more about this later, I promise. Number three, civil rights movement gains momentum in the 50s. Why? What about that era built up to success or beginnings of success in the civil rights movement? And I would expect that answer to talk about Brown versus Board of Education, desegregation of the military, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Emmett Till, that sort of stuff, and we'll talk about that later. And then number four, during the 1960s, perhaps the most important decade in history, yeah, because that's when I was born, the United States had become a more open and tolerant or freer country. Is that true or false? And of course, in this answer, you'll talk about how in some ways it had become a more free country, and in other ways there were still issues. All right, so before we get started talking more directly about World War II, you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns? Now would be a good time to ask. Seeing none in the chat, we will move to looking at the notes. Okay. All right, notes. I feel like all this stuff's posted in the course documents section. I know that it is because I added the questions and tried to add them in the same sequence that they'd been added before. So I know it's there. So things that you've got to remember when we talk about World War II. Thing number one, the United States did not join right away because that's what we do in World War I and World War II. Because honestly, not much of it happens near us. So, if the fight doesn't involve you directly, sometimes you stay out of it unless you're in middle school and then you get involved. Possible. I'm not comparing the United States to being, I'm not saying we were mature to stay out of it. You know that some of the truth is we're making profit by selling to both sides. And some of the truth is that initially it may not be our problem. So, but there's a lot, it's complicated. Of course, all of history is complicated. But, so World War II doesn't start near us. Thing number two, because it's a U.S. history class, our main concern is U.S. involvement in World War II. So we're not going to talk a whole lot about every important battle or Soviet politics, German politics, that sort of stuff. I do realize, by the way, Hitler's German. I wasn't trying to suggest that he was from the Soviet Union. But French politics, English politics, we won't talk about it from a global perspective as much because, again, US history. My assumption, I have two assumptions about this. One, you've already had a world history class in your high school, and two, you will have another one in your college. And some of you are going like, no, I won't, because I don't even like history. I don't even want to take this one. Well, one, oh, that's such a terrible attitude. And two, you will take a world history class in college. You just don't know it yet. I know some of you guys, you're so funny. You think the only thing you take in college is the stuff you want to take. I don't know. Have you gone to your college websites yet, like where you want to go and look at their degree plans? You will notice that almost every degree, no matter what you get, if it's from a four-year college, you're going to have 2 US history classes, 2 world history classes, and 2 government classes. So you're going to have 6 social studies classes, plus possibly 1 more as an elective, so 7, because that's how important this thing is. No one's going to make you take 7 math classes, guarantee you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have graduated from college. All right, more stuff. World War II starts officially in 1939. The United States joins in 1941. Our president, when we joined the war, is a fellow FDR. You've met him before, historically. I know he's not at your house or anything. He's been deceased for a while. So he better not be at your house. That'd be weird. But he is an important figure in US history because he'll be the only person in our history to get elected to the presidency 4 times. I know some of you are thinking, that's not even possible. Yes, it is. Well, was. Not so much now. Otherwise, honestly, you know, we might have had Clinton 4 times, or maybe Obama 4 times. I don't know, at least 3. We liked both of those guys pretty well. Not saying we didn't like other people, but the reason we could have FDR 4 times is there was not yet an amendment that limited the president to 2 terms. Now, before FDR, presidents had only served 2 terms because that's what George Washington did. And as a president, you wanted to follow that precedent. So people only served 2 terms because that's what Washington did. Now, if you're thinking, well, FDR, he must have been an arrogant guy. He thought he was more important than Washington. Well, he might have been an arrogant guy. I don't know. That's kind of up to you. But term number 3 for him starts in 1940, right after we've joined World War II. So his argument, which the American people agreed with, was these times are too traumatic, too pressured, too difficult. You know, there's too much crisis for us to change leaders in the middle. So people agreed with him. So we elected him a 3rd time. And then, of course, the 4th time, it's like, hey, it's almost over. You want me to finish it out? He probably didn't share with the American public he was really sick because he did die a few months after he took office of 44. So, all right, back to business, maybe. Maybe. I have a feeling there'll be more stuff like that, too. It's not exactly in the notes, but might be important to know. When we do declare war, FDR will eventually give a speech. Well, it's the State of the Union speech after he gets elected in 1940. I don't know if you ever watched those. They're traditions, you know, once a year. That goes all the way back to George Washington. Although some presidents gave the speech, Jefferson, who was a notoriously bad public speech speaker, would write out the speech and hand out copies. Sometimes people write their own speeches, sometimes they have other people. Washington wasn't that great of a writer. So usually Alexander Hamilton wrote his speeches. I know some of you are singing some musical songs, you know, about Alexander Hamilton. I watched that for the first time this summer. That was really interesting. Although I'm an old person, so my old people ears, it took a few minutes for me to kind of understand what they were saying. It's like, okay, I got it now. But anyway, all right. FDR gives his State of the Union speech, which is typically in January, and the president goes before the full Congress, so House and Senate. Oftentimes the Supreme Court shows up. They don't always. There's always one person who's not there in case, like in, what is that Will Smith movie? 4th of July, maybe? I don't know, where the aliens come and kill everybody who leads the government. You have to have one person out.
Independence Day.
Thank you. Independence Day. I'm so bad at popular culture. I'm the worst. Maybe not the worst, but pretty close. So yeah, like an Independence Day when the aliens come, you don't want to kill everybody who could run the country. So there's always that one person, cabinet member, who's somewhere in a bunker in a secret location or something. But everybody else is in the Capitol. The president gives a speech and says, the state of our union is strong, and talks about how great everything's going, except probably during the Civil War, when I'm guessing Abraham Lincoln didn't lie about that stuff. However, FDR's State of the Union speech in 1941 talks about the essential human freedoms, the 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And then this is in part a justification for why it's important for the United States to be involved in world events, because we want to make sure that everyone in the country, everyone in the world has these same freedoms. So freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want. So you have all the basic things you need to survive, primarily food, water, shelter, medical care, basic medical care, and then freedom from fear. So the Nazis aren't going to run your town or that sort of thing. So, and then you see the Norman Rockwell paintings in your textbook as a reminder. You know, they're kind of quaint and idyllic and that sort of thing. However, not very much is quaint and idyllic in 1941. It's a tough time. Now, then your book goes back to, you know, what's going on during the time period, and they start pre-World War II. So at first, 30s, Great Depression, most countries, including the United States, follow a policy of isolationism. So we want to, like, we'll trade with you, but we really don't want to be involved in your foreign policy. Because we don't want to get drawn into a war like happened in World War I, which of course they're still calling the Great War at this point because we're not planning on another war. And we're broke. So we don't want to pay for stuff that we can't afford to pay for. So U.S. policy of isolationism recognizes those two things. We don't want to be involved in another international conflict, and we are broke. Now, some other countries are going like, hey, they're staying out of stuff. Hey, so is England and France. Maybe now is a good time for us to do stuff. So there'll be some other rogue nations, of course, Japan, Germany, Italy, primarily, that'll do some stuff. Talk about the stuff here in a minute. The U.S. foreign policy is called the Good Neighbor policy during this time period. It's considered a repudiation. It's hard to say that word sometimes. Repudiation. Are you guys hearing a weird noise? Do we need to mute someone? I thought there was something wrong with my computer. Oh my goodness. Okay, so back to the Good Neighbor policy. Repudiation of the Roosevelt corollary, that addition to the Monroe Doctrine that said, if you're starting stuff in your own country, we're going to come and stop it. So, you know, giving us the carte blanche, the go-ahead to be the world's policeman. So we're saying, hey, we're out of the world policeman business because, one, it's your business. Maybe we're, you know, just more egalitarian at that point. We're more respectful of countries' rights, or maybe we're just broke. No. Cuba will repeal the Platt Amendment. So they're going to say, you know what? You guys can't come in whenever you feel like it. Excuse me. And then the only place we're going to take any action against Germany or what becomes the Axis powers is if they're in the Western Hemisphere. And you'll see a little bit of German intrusion into countries like Argentina or Chile, but not too much during this era, a little bit. Stuff that's going on in Europe, you know the big stuff with Germany taking over the neighbors, and Italy taking over Ethiopia. You also have a civil war in Spain. I am not suggesting that Japan and Manchuria, or that Japan and China are in Europe, but in Asia, Japan is taking over at least a province of China, the one where you grow most of the food, and there are more natural resources. So they're taking over that region, and the United States is an ally of China's during this time period, and we don't do anything to defend them, and they do ask. And then Japan starts building railroads to transport natural resources, food, that kind of stuff, and they will take captives from the Philippines and transport them to Manchuria, the ones who survive, to help build those railroads. So there's some rough stuff going on that Japan is sponsoring. Now, United States stays out of stuff, Great Britain mostly stays out of stuff, and France stays out of stuff too, until, you know, some other stuff happens. So by 36, we're out, you know, until 36, nobody's really intervening much. What you see next, this section kind of talks about how the war starts. And I'm assuming we're all good at this point. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns? Looking to see, I don't see anything in the chat. Gonna take a drink because I've been talking a lot. Okay, so how the war starts officially. I know you're gonna like Hitler. We all know this. That's true. I know you kind of got that. And you probably know more about Hitler than you should. Kids are weird. They were weird when I was a kid too. And we just want to read a bunch about Hitler. I don't know why. He's like one of the worst people who ever lived. So we just can't get enough of Hitler. When I was in, I can't remember if I think it was just a European history class. I don't think it was a grad school class because I didn't take a grad school class in World War II. But I had a professor in undergrad at Angelo State, the Mecca of knowledge, who had served in the Pentagon and had been an advisor to presidents during the Cold War. So he had a particular interest in World War II and the things that happened after World War II. So he made us read, or at least me, I think we all had different books. I had to read like a psychological biography of Adolf Hitler and all of the things that were potentially diagnosably wrong with him, and that has to be one of the most unpleasant things I've ever read. So it was bad. But most of you know that Hitler got elected to a legitimate office and then kind of rose up through power, or rose up through that office to take power. Then when the president of Germany died, von Hindenburg, he consolidated the two top offices, one that managed foreign policy and one that managed domestic policy, and then slowly kind of consolidated power for himself in ways that violated German constitution. But because the economy was improving, people were not as concerned about what he was doing to suppress minority rights, the rights of people who disagreed with him, dissidents, the word that's used in the notes. So because the economy was getting better, people weren't as concerned maybe as they should have been. And he also picked a group that people already disliked to especially harass, and that would be the Jews. All right, now I'm just gonna say, because I know you can make political analogies to present times. I know. But I would also argue, you can disagree with me and you're welcome to do it, that if you think, Trump, or if you think Biden are Hitler-like, I think it might be too much, but I do get the idea. I think I get what you're sort of suggesting, that a lot of times we are okay with whatever's wrong with our own party or group, as long as what matters most to us, which, you know, tends to be the economy for most people who follow politics, as long as the economy is okay, we don't care what else they do. And, you know, it can be a dangerous position. So I get that. I get that. So whether you know, wherever you are politically. I will say, even though we're not supposed to talk about politics, one of the things that bugs me the most about modern politics, and we go through phases like this, is that my party's great, your party's the devil. And, you know, the truth is almost always when you have two presidential candidates, there are good things about them and they have pretty deep flaws as well. So for whatever reason, it's really easy for us to talk about the flaws in the candidate we don't like and the party we don't like, and really overlook them in the party we do like. You have a very extreme case of that with Hitler in Germany. And of course, you know, they'd lost World War I. They'd had really what was probably an unfair punishment financially, the $33 billion. The economy completely collapsed to where they had to create an entire new system, monetary system. So they were in a bad way. And they were pretty willing to put up with all kinds of foolishness, to way beyond foolishness, horrific stuff that Hitler had telegraphed that he was going to do and then actually did do, because they got a result that they liked, no matter what the negative side effects were. All right, I'm going to stop talking about that, but we'll keep going about other stuff. Okay, so Hitler leads a general recovery of the economy through public works projects. So lots of public works projects, and also a rebuilding of the military. And once that military is rebuilt, and of course at this point everything's new because you don't build old stuff, then he's going to start using it to take over the neighbors. The first neighbor he takes over really used to be part of Germany, the Rhineland. That was one of the sections, the Ruhr region and the Rhineland had been loaned to France. So what had been given to France, I think the Rhineland had been given to France, and then Germany just said, you know what, we're taking it back. They were supposed to have it for 20 years to help recover from the costs of World War I. France doesn't do anything about it because they're broke and they really don't have a military that can do a lot about it. Then if people object to what Hitler's doing, Hitler has them arrested and put in jail. So minority groups and dissidents, people who object, are punished with imprisonment, confiscation of property, eventually concentration camps, and then death. And the US is going to pretty early pass neutrality acts like, hey, whatever happens over here, we're staying out of it, none of our business. In 1938, Germany signs a treaty, a non-aggression treaty pact, Nazi-Soviet pact, with the Soviet Union. This agreement says that when Germany invades Poland, which they planned to do, that they would split Poland with the Soviet Union as long as the Soviet Union stayed out of it. Now, that's of course not the public part of the treaty. The public part of the treaty is just a non-aggression treaty, like we won't attack you, you don't attack us. But that they signal to Slavic people in the region that the Soviet Union is not going to back them up if the Germans take over their country. So Germany invades Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and lots of Scandinavian countries during that era. That's not the order in which that stuff happened, so apologies about that. Although, no, it's not the order. Okay. England and France will sign a pact with Germany as well. That's usually called the Munich Pact, which asks Germany to stop taking over European countries. Like, hey, we got it. You took over the Rhineland because that used to be part of Germany. You took over Austria because you might argue that used to be part of Germany, plus Hitler's from Austria, uniting the, you know, part of the region that used to be, you know, kind of that pre-Germany sort of empire, and the Sudetenland, the German-speaking region of Czechoslovakia. So France and England said, you know what, you can keep that stuff, but don't take over anymore. That's enough. So that's the Nazi-Soviet Pact, or excuse me, the Munich Pact, the Munich Pact, which other people will consider, they'll call it appeasement. Those other people, primarily people who agreed with Winston Churchill, that Neville Chamberlain, the prime minister who helped arrange this agreement, was really just appeasing Germany, not bringing peace in our time, which is what Neville Chamberlain claimed he was doing. So the promise that Germany makes is they're not going to invade anyone else. So this happens toward the end of 1938, and then Hitler goes back to the Reichstag, the German legislature, and gives a speech where he talks about the countries they plan to invade in the near future. So it's very clear that Hitler has no intention of keeping his word. And of course, you know, if you say that in the modern era, you go like, who would think Hitler would keep his word? Which was Winston Churchill's point. But Chamberlain was just hoping. You know, it's like, man, we don't want to go to war. It's too expensive. A bunch of people die. Maybe this will take care of it, but it did not. Okay, excuse me. So, when Germany invades Poland in 1939, September 1st, September 3rd, Great Britain and France declare war on Germany. So that was their pledge to defend Poland. If you're wondering what's going on in the United States, we're not declaring war on anybody, I can tell you that. When the war first starts, we're going to sell to both sides because that's what we do. And then we are going to become more partial to England and France. So we will sell them things, but the policy is cash and carry. Now, we would also sell to Germany at the beginning of the war, same policy, so they have to come over and get it, and we won't extend credit to them. So they got to pick it up. It's like a sale, I suppose, where there's no delivery. Now, if you're wondering, like, why would we do that? You remember, I know you remember, World War I, or the Great War. Part of the reason we get involved in that is we are shipping goods back and forth to England and France when they're having a conflict with Germany, and Germany's sinking our ships. So that ship sinking is one of the things that kind of draws us toward war. I know, Zimmerman note, I know. But the ship sinking also was a problem. So our thought is, if we are not shipping things in the Atlantic, we're not going to have a problem. So just stay out of the Atlantic, no war. And if English or French ships get sunk, we don't care, not our ships. So FDR then runs for his third term in 1940. And then as soon as he is elected president, this is after the European declaration of war, after he's elected, he gives his State of the Union speech where he says that the United States is going to be the arsenal of democracy, also Four Freedoms, same time, I think. No, Four Freedoms is the year after, right? It is, I don't know, why am I asking you? I'm not saying you don't know, but so FDR says that we are going to be the arsenal of democracy. So we're going to supply our European friends with everything we need. So we are going to move away from, clearly we've moved from neutrality to cash and carry, and then we're moving to the Lend-Lease policy in 1941. So we initiate the Lend-Lease policy because England and France, at this point, primarily England, Great Britain, excuse me, they're broke. They need money. And France has already been taken over by the Germans. So England has to hold out. Otherwise, the Germans have taken over all of Europe, which is why they're going to consistently argue we should join the war. And we're going to say, like, nope, but we'll keep sending you stuff. Now, the Lend-Lease policy says that we'll just give you the stuff you need in exchange for a lease, 99-year lease on some land in your country where we can build military bases. So it's sort of a hint that we think we're probably going to have to go to war and we'll need a place to launch, you know, a base of operations in Europe. So Lend-lease policy is going to give us the land where we will eventually have military bases, and we still do have several of those in England and Germany, although clearly we're not making this deal with Germany during that time period, and France and other places. So there'll be a senator, it's one of the Tafts, I think it's Robert Taft, who will argue that this is just like lending somebody chewing gum, that you really don't want it back when they're done with it. And that is true. That is true. So the lend-lease policy, which some people opposed because they thought it would draw us into the war effort, because it would, does get enacted. And then FDR tells Japan, you know what? All the money you have in the United States, investments, banks, that kind of stuff, we're going to freeze that because you're using that to attack our ally, China. And they were using that to buy aviation fuel primarily and scrap metal for their battleships and their planes. So they told us if we cut them off, that they would attack us. I mean, they weren't kidding around. They go like, you do this and we're gonna, you're gonna pay. And we tell them like, well, do what you have to do. So they do. Now, our thought was that they would not actually attack the contiguous, they wouldn't attack the United States. That probably they would attack Philippines or some other place, Midway, some place where we had, that we had control of, Guam, someplace like that. But they wouldn't attack the United States. They end up, as you know, bombing Pearl Harbor. And that's going to lead to a US declaration of war. So, bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, the date that will live in infamy. The thought was, by the people who planned the attack, that most of the US aircraft carriers would be at Pearl Harbor at that time. It turns out that none of them were. Now, a couple of ships, battleships, important ones, do get sunk, and it's very tragic, and there's a large loss of life, but it's not nearly the catastrophe that Japan had hoped for and planned. So it's why one of their admirals, Yamamoto, said that all Japan had done that day was awaken a sleeping giant. So December 7, 1941 is a Sunday. The attack happens early in the morning when people are asleep, at church, playing golf, whatever you do on a Sunday in Pearl Harbor. So they weren't at their post. So it was a surprise attack. I know have you seen the movie Pearl Harbor? My goodness, my nieces made me watch that movie because you've already gathered I'm not really good at popular culture, and they sort of pity me because they're very trendy and stylish and that kind of stuff. They occasionally tell me what I can wear when we go out in public. They're hard, man. They're hard. But they made me watch the Pearl Harbor movie. Have you seen it? Any of you seen it? So it's got some famous people in it who fall in love with some other famous people. And the whole love thing takes like an hour and a half. So I'm just dying during this movie, and they're just looking at me like, what's wrong, Theo? What's wrong? And I go, this is supposed to be a movie about Pearl Harbor, and it's just a big love story. Now at the end, there's an attack and some other stuff. So it finally does happen. They just looked at me like, oh my gosh, she's so weird. It's true, kind of am. But at any rate, if you watch that Pearl Harbor movie, it's not that helpful. Except I think probably some of the battle scenes are fairly accurate, but this happens on a Sunday. And the way that we get involved in a war is through a declaration of war. So the way that works constitutionally is that the president gets the full House, or has to assemble the full Congress and ask them to vote on a declaration of war. So FDR lets them know he's going to ask for a full declaration of war, and then they get together on that Monday, December 8th, and vote to declare war. And he gives the speech where he says that December 7th, 1941 is a date that will live in infamy. This is also a reminder to you, I know how you people are. You guys like to write things, one draft, and then just turn it in. I know how you are. You probably do it right before it's due. Do you think FDR only had one draft of his speech? No. Do you think Thomas Jefferson only had one draft of the Declaration of Independence? No. Do you know that in the first draft of this war declaration speech, that FDR said that December 7, 1941 was a date that will live in world history? That is what he said. So aren't you glad that he rewrote that? This is where you're supposed to go like, oh my gosh, I'm glad that he rewrote that. You can't turn in your first draft. It wasn't good enough for FDR, and it wasn't good enough for Jefferson. It's not good enough for you. Don't turn in your first draft. Okay. So date that will live in infamy, December 7, 1941. That's Pearl Harbor Day. We declare war the next day. All right, this is my disclaimer where I say if you really like military part of World War II, this is not going to be your thing. I am sorry. I'm really not big on the military history, weapon kind of stuff. Probably my sexist comment will be because I'm a girl, although I definitely have some female historian friends who like this stuff way more than I do. I am fairly intrigued by the military leaders of the time period. I know generally why some of the military stuff was important, but if you were to ask me to be able to distinguish this type of tank from that one, no chance. This type of gun from that one, no chance. This sort of artillery from that sort, also no chance. So I'm sorry. But I can tell you why some of the major battles were important because that's my job. It's what I do. All right. But if you like the military history thing, you're not going to get that in a survey class. But you might be able, depending on what university you go to take a separate military history class. I'm just saying. Like if you go to West Point, I'm pretty sure you'll have one of those, or Annapolis, or even the Air Force Academy. You'll get those things. Maybe Texas A&M, possibly the Mecca of knowledge, Angelo State. That's possible because it's right next to a military base. However, other universities, maybe not as much, but anyway. And military history is kind of not a trend right now, but labor history is a trend. Yeah. But anyway, and environmental history is becoming more trendy. I'm not so good at that either, but anyway. If you want to see more about battles, now I did put some charts in here, but I'm also going to go to the timeline. Let me see if I can find it. You guys aren't saying anything in the chat, are you? All right, kids, I hope you're paying attention. Let's see. I don't see it. Let me try to open it, sorry. Where did that link go? Oh, I think a bird just hit my window. Maybe it's raining. Is it raining? Could be a small bird. Where did you people go? Oh, there you are. Okay. I hate it when you go away. I just opened the timeline. Why can't I find it? I'm so glad I'm recording this. What? It's being rude. All right, one more try. Sorry. Poo-poo. Dang. It's really not being very helpful at all. Okay. I feel like this is going to work this time. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I've only taught on Zoom for essentially 8 months and I still can't figure it out. And we have that recorded. So this is from historyonthenet.com. And it's like, I don't know, is that a reputable site? Pretty much. Do you go to Wikipedia all the time? Yes. Stop it, by the way. One of the ways that kind of helps you decide whether you like the site or not is when they tell you who made the site. So here we have like the editor and some of his qualifications, and you can read his bio, and you can find out if he's semi-legit, and then you can search him other places. And I know you're going like, yeah, we don't have time for that. Make time for that sometime if you want to know if this stuff's true. But this is a really super basic World War II timeline. And then he's got other timelines if you're interested in those things too. Emergence of Nazi Germany, D-Day, which of course is the Allied invasion of France to try to retake that. But this gives you a really good timeline of all the major events that lead to World War II, or that are part of World War II. And it's really long. It also has ads there too, like what to do if you get a speeding ticket. That's probably much more relevant to you than me, because for whatever reason, teens get them more often. Maybe because you speed more. I don't know. Could be other things. But what you'll notice if you look at the timeline is that almost all the early stuff is more helpful to the Axis. And once you start to see like the British sort of stop the assault to the West, then there's a little bit of stuff that goes the way of the Allies. Occasionally some stuff in Northern Africa that works out well for the Allies, but that takes a while. And then you really see the bigger turn of events happening 42, 43, by 43 and 44, that it's fairly consistent that the Germans are starting to lose. So, all right, let me stop that. All right, and I know it's almost time to go, but you all, some of you showed up late, so don't be mad. Don't be mad, hang on a sec. Okay, so one of the things that I will point out to you is I've also put a couple of charts in here with battles. I've arranged it, it's not an uncommon arrangement at all, fairly typical with the Atlantic and Pacific Theater. That doesn't mean we're going to the movies, or you're gonna go see Alexander Hamilton or any other musical. It means that this is the stuff happening in Europe, so Atlantic Ocean, Atlantic Theater, and this is the stuff happening in Asia, Pacific Theater. And you'll notice that most of these battles are the beginnings of some turning points for the Allies. Everything that happens like 39, up through 41, early 42, really is going to go the way of the Germans, as you might imagine. So next time we will talk more specifically about a few battles, some of the stuff that's going on in the United States at the same time, and then maybe relate that to the weekly question. All right, so before you leave, let me see if I'm missing anybody. Did Alex come? Alex Dysart? You guys got it? I'm looking. I don't see an A for Alex. I don't see a D. All right. So I think he's not here, so we're going to count him absent. The rest of you, I think, are here. So if you're not here, what a huge bonus for you. I think you are. All right. Before you go, do you have any questions you would like to ask? We still have time because I think we're officially, how long are we supposed to be here? I'm looking. 47.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes.
Yeah. So we got 5 minutes or 4. We got some minutes. We do. Plus, again, some of you, you're supposed to be here at 52 and you show up like 55 or 3 o'clock. You don't care. So, do you guys have any questions? I should probably stop recording since I'm giving you a hard time. Do we need evidence of that? No.